I'm delighted to be here, and to the admonition that I'm supposed to tell you who's going to win, if I knew, I would be in Las Vegas. One of the ways to think about this is rather simple. If President Obama wins the election, it's in spite of the economy and because of a good campaign. If Governor Romney wins the election, it's because of the economy and in spite of a rather poor campaign. I say that knowing that if Governor Romney does win the election, it's not because of his campaign, but because of a rather spectacular first debate performance that, contrary to just about everything that we know about debates, that event that evening proved to be transformative. Most of us believe that Governor Romney, the election was slipping away from him before that debate took place, and it gave him renewed momentum. Get on that website and see the average of the polls. Right now, 47 for Obama, 47 for Romney. This election could be an election in which literally on November 6th at midnight, we still are not quite sure who won the presidential election, revisiting 2000. But having said that, what matters, and this is kind of intriguing, is one simple proposition. All states are not equal, and all voters are not equal. I have to be careful when you're teaching Government 101 that people don't get the wrong idea about that. We don't, if you're talking about presidential elections, who cares about New York and Illinois and California? I don't care about them. Make any of you a wager, a dinner, wherever, I know who's going to win. And it's not Governor Romney. I know who's going to win Mississippi and Alabama and Texas, you get my point, and it's not President Obama. So the structure of American politics right now is that presidential elections boil down to not arguably at the top 12, at the lower end, maybe 7 states. You win the electoral votes of those states and you become the next president of the United States. And in my business, which is the business of numbers, there's only one number that matters, and that's 270. That's the number of electoral votes it takes to become President of the United States. So the whole point about this election is to get to 270, and you're going to get to 270 by doing some kind of configuration of 7 to 9 states. And the calculus isn't tough. So all voters don't matter, because if you're President Obama or Governor Romney, you don't care about the voters in New York or California or Utah or Mississippi or Alabama. You care about the voters in 7 to 9 states. Now, I wish I could tell you, and I'll just go through them quickly: Florida, North Carolina, Virginia, New Hampshire, Ohio, Wisconsin, Iowa, Colorado, and maybe Nevada. That's it. That's it. The other states, I did mention a certain state, didn't I? I did mention Pennsylvania. Brace my heart to do this. But let me just stop for a moment and say something about our state. For a good bit of modern history, certainly from 1960 forward, Pennsylvania had become a pivotal state. For most of our history, we were largely committed to one party or another. In the early days of the Republic, the Democrats, and after the Civil War up until 1960, Republicans, since 1960, pretty much of a battleground state, with either party given, certain political tendencies likely to win our state. In the last 5 elections, however, going back to Bush 41, the last Republican to win, Democrats have won 5 straight presidential elections. But other than Obama's 10-point victory here 4 years ago, and pretty competitive, Bush lost the state to Gore by 4 points. He lost the state to Kerry by 2.5. In 2008, we were the 3rd most visited state in the Union by the presidential candidates from Labor Day to Election Day. And on television money, advertising, we were the 2nd most TV advertised state in terms of dollars, $29 million by the Obama and the McCain campaigns. WGAL thanks them profusely for their contributions. I thank them as well. At any rate, this year, as we sit here, not a single commercial is being aired by any of the candidates in our state. Now that is likely to change from some news reports that are just out this morning. And 40 visits by McCain, Palin, Obama, Biden from Labor Day to Election Day in 2008, 2 as we speak. Governor Romney in the Union League in Philly about 2 weeks ago, and then he did a little event at Die Forge Military Academy, and Congressman Ryan in Pittsburgh, where he was in an airport hangar speaking to about 500 people, got back on a plane, and obviously went to Ohio. So the point is that whether Pennsylvania is relevant or not is an interesting question. However, in the last couple of weeks, the election in our state is tight. President Obama had a substantial lead in Pennsylvania through most of this election cycle, before the conventions, in the polls that I did and others did, 10 and 11, 12 points. After the convention, 8, 9, 10, 11. But since the debate, as it tightened nationally, it also tightened in Pennsylvania. The president has 4, 5, 6, 7-point lead, something in that range. But here's the key. Remember those battleground states I talked about a moment ago? In 7 of them, not 3 percentage points separates Obama from Romney. And so, if you're looking at putting together that configuration of 270, are you going to spend a lot of money in a state where there's 5, 6, 7 points difference, or are you going to spend the money in a state where there's 1.5, 2, 3-point differences? The big enticement for Pennsylvania is if you take all of those battleground states, and let's throw us into that mix and enlarge it to 12. We'll put Michigan in, we'll put Missouri in, we'll put Nevada in. If we enlarge it, we have the second largest number of electoral votes. We have 20, Florida has 29, Ohio has 18. So if you happen to win Pennsylvania, that counters, for example, New Hampshire, Iowa, and Colorado, which is a big enticement for candidates, if they think they can win our state, to spend a lot more time and more money here, because, as they say, it's the big enchilada. On the other hand, to do any advertising in this state, and my Philadelphia TV client, WPVI, and I'll have to say this with tongue-in-cheek, Philadelphia television market reaches 40% of the voters of the state, all of the Delaware, because Delaware does not have commercial TV, and the southern half of New Jersey, but it's in the 4th largest market in the country, translation, expensive to run television ads. And so that's a critical decision that the candidates have to make moving forward about how to put that configuration together in order to get to 270. As we sit here today, it looks like Governor Romney is well positioned to win Florida, North Carolina, and Virginia. That's 29, 15, and 13 electoral votes respectively. But his path to the presidency is tough without Ohio, because the president's structural lead in these other battleground states. That is why a disproportionate amount of time and candidate effort, as well as advertising, is literally aimed at the state of Ohio. For it's hard to figure out how Governor Romney wins without it, because he would have to win the remainder of those battleground states. For President Obama, Pennsylvania is critical, because if he loses Pennsylvania, it's hard to figure out how he can win, particularly if Romney wins Florida, North Carolina, and Virginia. So we can play the electoral college chessboard all we want, but I'm not predicting this. It is not inconceivable that we would have an electoral vote winner who's not the popular vote winner, as we had in 2000. The likely scenario would be the reverse of 2000, with the Republican winning the popular vote, Romney, but losing the electoral vote, exactly the opposite of what occurred in 2000. Or we could have 2004, where in order to win the presidency, President Bush needed the state of Ohio. And without the state of Ohio, and its then 19 electoral votes, John Kerry would have become President of the United States, and President President Bush only won the state by 40 or 50,000 votes. God forbid we end up with 269. And you can at least play around with the Electoral College map. I have no life, so I sit there and play with the Electoral College map. I look at polls trying to figure out what's going to happen. Okay, how do I figure? And listen to this scenario. First of all, we'll have rioting in the streets if we get 269. Then the House of Representatives picks the president. Well, guess what? Each member doesn't have a vote in Congress as a whole. Each state has one vote. So Delaware, with one member of Congress, has the same vote in picking the president as Pennsylvania does with 18 members in Congress, or with California with, what, 53 members of Congress. There are 33 delegations controlled by Republicans. And even after the election, no one believes that the Republicans won't control the majority of the delegations. But if the Senate stays Democratic, and this would be really neat, this would be really neat. President Romney and Vice President Biden.
Oh, right.
Think about that process. I mean, it's almost worth wanting to happen in a jocular fashion. So let's set that. I don't think he was able to escape that. And I don't have time to get into the nuances of the debate and what he did. But if he wins, that proved to be transformative. The second thing he did was that Republicans did not have a great convention. I attended both. This is my 11th and 12th conventions doing media work for WGAL and a bunch of other media outlets. And it's not that they didn't have great speeches. I mean, Marco Rubio gave one of the best speeches I've heard, and we loved the kind of speech that he gave. Comes up, an immigrant comes with nothing, makes something of himself, up from the bootstraps, the old Horatio Alger story. What's not to love about it? It's our country, right? And then Chris Christie gives another great speech. The only problem was, it was about them. Where was Mitt Romney? You know, guys, please talk about why Mitt Romney should be president, not why you should be president in 2016. And then the Democrats had a much more focused convention. The Republicans were waging a war on women. The Republicans were waging a war on the middle class. And so coming out of the convention, Obama has this initiative. And it goes to about a 3.5 to 4 point lead nationally. And in most of at one point, if you looked at the average in those 9 battleground states I'm talking about, Romney only led in 2 of them. Obama led in 7 of them. And so what if Romney wins, conversely, it's because of the economy and the problem that the president has, which is quite simple. Voters are going to have to take a look and answer one fundamental question that Bill Clinton raised during the Democratic convention that is at the heart, the single most critical question in a campaign, and it's simply this. Here's what President Clinton said in a 52-minute speech, by the way, when it wasn't about him. But here's what he said. Neither me, because when Bill Clinton talks, it's always about him, nor any of my predecessors in American history could have done more to save us from a depression, to do as much as they could to fight this recession. That was his argument. So think about it. So what the voters have to decide is whether the 4 years under President Obama, and we know all the numbers. By the way, if it's purely based on numbers, the president should lose. Why do I say? I mean, was well on its way to recovery. As we sit here today, we just don't know. The fact is, we just don't know. And so, if you look at purely economics of it, the president should probably lose. But why isn't he? Largely because they've been able to run an extraordinarily skillful campaign. And Romney's campaign, conversely, I think has not been nearly as skillful, and in fact, filled with missed opportunities throughout the course of the campaign. And so as we move into the final couple of weeks, 2 weeks, less than 2 weeks now, the question remains, in 7 states, the race is razor thin, and it essentially boils down now, I think, to which party's voters in those states turn out to vote. Typically, we talk about undecided voters, and I got to be really careful here. really care. I'm glad professors have tenure. Real care. I go and I think, now gee, an undecided voter only needs to hear one more speech. You know, a year campaign, $2 billion will be spent by these candidates, and someone at this point only needs to listen to one more speech to make up their mind. You get the point I'm trying to make. And the number of undecided voters in the battleground states, remember, we don't care about the undecided voters in New York, you got it, or Utah, we don't care about them. We only care about the undecided voters in 7 to 9 states. The undecided voters are relatively small, maybe 3, 4, 5%. And what do we know about them? Number one, they don't pay much attention to campaigns as a whole, some do. And number two, they may not vote. So the campaigns this year, instead of stressing undecided voters, are really going after their voters that are heavily partisan but not likely to turn out. And so the get out the vote efforts this year by both candidates would be virtually unprecedented. Obama got about 2 to 3 points in some of these states 4 years ago by a tremendous get out the vote effort. McCain did virtually nothing. This year the Republicans are doing far more. So what's going on in the final days is there's relatively few undecideds, and get out the vote drive in 7 to 9 states are going to decide the next president of the United States. I don't think, barring something that we don't know, some October surprise, that much is going to change in the environment. The race has become very, very stable. But here's something interesting. 1 or 2 percentage points of change in 7 states can decide the next president of the United States. That's how razor thin, which is why I will end with this part of what I want to say from where I began is I have no clue.